Okay, let's unpack this feeling. You know, that persistent sense of deja vu in our own lives.
Hmm.
Not the fleeting kind, but like the heavier one, where you find yourself in really familiar territory, even if the scenery has changed.
Right. Like a relationship that starts off great seems totally different.
Yeah. But then somehow it replays those same old heartaches or, a career move. It's meant to be this breath of fresh air.
And then you find yourself dealing with the same kinds of frustrations.
Like I say.
It's almost like there's this long, dimly lit hallway inside us, you know, with all these half-open doors.
That's a powerful metaphor.
And you peek into each one thinking, maybe this time?
This is the one.
Right. Only to find yourself in a room that feels, I don't know, unsettlingly familiar. Same shadows, same faint scent of disappointment, maybe.
That feeling of, I've been here before.
Even though you tell yourself, this time will be different, and you really mean it. But somehow.
Yeah.
Well, it's often more than just bad luck or, coincidence. What we're often experiencing there is really just the surface. It's a manifestation of deeper unconscious patterns.
Deeper patterns.
Yeah, think of it like an internal current. It's subtle, but it's steering you back towards certain kinds of situations, certain relationships, even when, consciously, that those situations haven't worked out well before, haven't brought happiness.
Exactly. It's like those doors aren't just random. They're almost magnetic. They pull you in.
That's a good way to put it. There's a pull.
And the rooms behind them, they might look different superficially, but they resonate with these echoes from our past. So we step through hoping for something new.
But the underlying emotional landscape, the feeling of it all, is strangely and often uncomfortably familiar.
So it's not random. You're saying these repetitions, they happen for a reason.
Yes, absolutely. There's often a very compelling, though unconscious reason we find ourselves drawn back to these familiar scenarios, even the negative ones. It frequently points towards unresolved inner conflicts.
Conflicts? Like what?
Well, maybe unmet needs from earlier in life, perhaps from childhood, or even buried emotional experiences, traumas maybe, that haven't been fully processed, fully worked through. The psyche, in a way, seems to be trying to revisit these things, perhaps trying to gain some kind of mastery over these past experiences by, well, re-engaging with similar dynamics.
It's that push and pull, isn't it? Like, on one hand, we all want to grow, connect, find fulfillment. That's a basic human drive.
Of course.
But then there's this other almost invisible force that just tugs us back to what we know, even if what we know is, frankly, kind of miserable.
The familiar. Even if it's painful, it can feel safer, paradoxically, than stepping into the truly unknown. The uncertainty can be terrifying.
Yeah, the devil you know.
Precisely. And this is where our psychological defenses really kick in. These are strategies we unconsciously use to shield ourselves from emotional pain, things we do without realizing.
Defenses, like what kind of things?
Well, common ones include projection, for instance. We might project our own unacceptable feelings or insecurities onto someone else, attribute our stuff to them.
Okay.
Or rationalization, that's a big one. We create these seemingly logical explanations for our choices or situations, but these explanations actually obscure the deeper unconscious motivations driving us.
Okay, give me an example. Like, someone keeps ending up with partners who are really distant emotionally.
Right, that's a classic pattern.
So they might rationalize it like, oh, they're just super focused on their work right now, or maybe they just need time. Eventually they'll open up.
Exactly, that's the rationalization. But underneath that perfectly plausible explanation, there might be an unconscious pull towards that familiar dynamic of unavailability. Maybe it echoes something from their past.
Ah, okay. So the rationalization helps them avoid facing the actual pattern, the repetition.
Precisely. It protects them from the pain of seeing that pattern and maybe where it comes from. And even things we just think of as bad habits, like procrastination.
Oh, tell me about it.
Chuckles lightly. Well, it might not just be laziness,
Yeah.
right? It could be a way of unconsciously avoiding the anxiety that comes with potentially failing at something.
Right.
Or maybe even an act of unconscious resistance against pressure, against expectations.
So the symptom itself, the procrastination, is like a compromise.
Yes, a compromise formation. It's a way for an inner conflict, maybe the desire to succeed versus the fear of failure to express itself, without us having to consciously grapple with the core issue.
Wow. Okay, this is getting deeper. And you mentioned transference before we started recording. How does that fit in?
Transference, yes. That's really central to this. It's essentially how we unconsciously overlay feelings, expectations, and relationship patterns from our past, especially from early significant relationships, onto people in our present lives.
So wait, if you had, say, a really critical parent growing up,
Mm-hmm.
you might react really defensively to your boss at work, even if they just give neutral feedback. Like you hear criticism even if it wasn't really there.
Exactly that. You're not responding just to your boss in that moment.
Mm.
You're responding to your boss through the lens of that past relationship with the critical parent. The past is intruding on the present.
Okay. So you're not really seeing the person in front of you clearly.
Often, no.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing them filtered through these old templates. It's quite powerful how the past shapes our current interactions, often completely without our awareness or conscious consent. We might be unconsciously casting people in roles from our personal history.
And then reacting to them based on those old scripts.
Precisely, based on those deeply ingrained expectations.
Which leads to more repetition, presumably.
Often, yes. And then there's resistance, another key concept.
That's resistance, like resisting change.
Exactly. It's that internal pushback against becoming aware, against changing these patterns. It can show up in so many subtle and not so subtle ways.
Like
Suddenly forgetting therapy appointments, for example, or abruptly changing the subject when a conversation gets too close to a sensitive topic, or becoming very intellectual and detached when emotions start to well up.
Like your mind just hits the brakes.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's like the unconscious saying, whoa, hold on, this is getting uncomfortable. Let's back away. Let's retreat to safer ground.
So going back to the hallway metaphor, resistance is like, I don't know, a locked door or a barrier you can't see.
Yes, an unseen obstacle perhaps, preventing us from fully opening certain doors or even wanting to look behind them. It's often rooted in the fear of what we might find there, fear of confronting painful memories, or maybe feelings we deem unacceptable.
Even if we consciously want to change.
Even then, the unconscious resistance can be incredibly powerful, keeping us tethered to those familiar, unsatisfying patterns. Because in a strange way, those patterns offer a kind of stability.
Right. Even the bad patterns feel known, predictable.
They provide a kind of psychological equilibrium, however dysfunctional. And it's widely thought, as we touched on, that these patterns often have their roots way back in our early experiences, childhood.
Yeah. Those first interactions, the family environment, that really lays the groundwork, doesn't it, for how we see ourselves, how we relate to the world.
It's absolutely critical. Those formative years create the initial neural pathways, the blueprints for our automatic responses. So decades later, even if those responses aren't serving us well in our adult lives,
They still feel right or safe somehow.
Yeah.
Because they're just so deeply ingrained.
exactly, they're familiar, they're what the system knows.
Yeah.
So breaking free really requires recognizing where these patterns started and understanding the unmet needs or unresolved conflicts that are still fueling them today.
Okay. So if someone listening is recognizing this in themselves, that feeling of being stuck in one of those familiar, unwanted rooms,
Yeah.
what's the first step? Where do you even begin?
Well, the crucial first step really is cultivating awareness. Just starting to notice.
Noticing what specifically?
Noticing those defenses as they pop up, the rationalizing, the projecting. Recognizing the recurring emotional reactions or those symptoms, like the procrastination we talked about. Observing the transference patterns. How do you tend to react to certain types of people? And importantly, acknowledging any internal resistance you feel when you try to look at these things.
So it's like starting to see the invisible strings, the things that are pulling the puppet, so to speak.
Beautifully put, yes. Seeing the threads that weave these patterns together, it requires honest self-reflection.
Asking the tough questions.
Yes. Questions like, what am I consistently avoiding, emotionally or situationally? What stories do I tell myself to justify my choices or my situation? Is there unfinished business from my past that might be bleeding into my present?
That kind of introspection, it's not easy.
No, it can be quite challenging. But it's the essential starting point for gaining any real deeper understanding. Without awareness, we're just reacting.
There's also this idea you mentioned, wish fulfillment. How does that play into repeating patterns? It sounds counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But the idea is that sometimes our unconscious desires, which can be completely hidden from our conscious mind, can actually drive these repetitive patterns, even if those desires seem to conflict with what we think we want.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Someone might consciously strive for financial success and security, that's their stated goal, but unconsciously, they might harbor deep feelings of guilt, perhaps about having more than their family had growing up, or sense of unworthiness.
Okay.
That unconscious guilt or unworthiness could then lead to behaviors that result in repeated financial setbacks, poor investments, overspending, job losses. It's as if the unconscious wish to not succeed or to punish oneself overrides the conscious desire to succeed.
Wow. So our motivations are way more complex than we think. We can have these hidden contradictory agendas running the show.
Very much so. The inner landscape is rarely straightforward or purely logical. These hidden currents exert a powerful influence.
So maybe instead of seeing this repetition just as a negative thing, like we're doomed to repeat mistakes, could it also be seen as like a signal, a message from ourselves?
That's a very insightful perspective, yes. It can absolutely be framed that way. Not just a cycle we're trapped in, but perhaps a persistent notification from the psyche. A signal that something unresolved requires attention.
Like the psyche is saying, hey, look over here, something needs healing.
Precisely. Think of those recurring patterns as an internal messenger, persistently trying to deliver a message. The repetitions are the message, but it's often encoded in feelings and situations and experiences.
So our job is to learn to decode it.
Exactly. To understand what our inner world is trying to communicate through these recurring life themes.
There's this image I came across, the shattered mirror. What does that represent in this context?
Ah, the shattered mirror. It often symbolizes that moment of confrontation, when we finally start to see the fragmented nature of our inner world or inner conflicts.
So the cracks in the mirror are like the different parts of us pulling in different directions, the conflicts.
Yes. The internal tensions, the opposing desires, the buried fears, and it's within those fractures, those cracks, that something new can emerge. What psychoanalysis might call latent content, the deeper, previously hidden meaning behind the manifest struggles.
Seeing yourself in that shattered way, it must be jarring, unsettling.
It often is. It can be quite painful to see those contradictions and conflicts laid bare. But that very confrontation is often the catalyst for genuine insight. It's the point where the pieces start to come together in a new way. We begin to recognize the underlying architecture of our patterns.
And I've heard that dreams can sometimes reflect this process too, like changes in dreams can be significant.
Oh, absolutely. Dreams can be incredibly telling. Even subtle shifts in, say, a recurring dream motif or narrative can signal a turning point deep down.
Really? Even if you don't consciously feel like anything's changed yet?
Yes. It can be an unconscious acknowledgement that something is shifting, that change is needed or underway, even if the conscious mind hasn't fully caught up or doesn't know the path forward yet. The unconscious might be processing and moving before we're fully aware.
So paying attention to dreams could offer clues.
It can provide a valuable window. Dreams often bypass our usual conscious defenses, so they can offer glimpses into these underlying shifts, these evolving perspectives. Even small changes in dream imagery can signify real movement at a deeper level.
But getting that insight, whether through dreams or reflection, it's not just like a light bulb moment, an intellectual aha. It needs to be more than that.
Oh, much more. True transformative insight involves what's sometimes called an emotional encounter with the truth. It's not enough to just understand something intellectually.
You have to feel it.
You have to feel its weight, its impact, its resonance within your emotional being. Think of the person who intellectually knows their parent was critical. The real insight doesn't land until they emotionally connect that past criticism to their present-day feelings of inadequacy or fear.
Ah, okay. It's that feeling connection that makes it real, that makes it stick.
That emotional resonance is crucial. It's what transforms intellectual knowledge, which can remain quite abstract, into a profound embodied understanding. When we truly feel the impact of our past, that's when we can start to integrate it differently.
And that insight, that emotional understanding, it's really just the beginning, isn't it? It doesn't magically fix everything.
Not at all. It's the doorway. It often leads us into what can be called a transitional space or a liminal space, a space where the old patterns are loosened, but the new way isn't fully formed yet.
An in-between place.
Exactly. And it's in this space that the real work of transformation can begin. It involves starting to integrate those parts of ourselves we've maybe pushed away or denied, the disowned parts.
Like the anger you weren't allowed to feel, or the vulnerability you learned to hide.
Precisely. Integration is about bringing these fragmented aspects back into a more cohesive whole, acknowledging and accepting the full spectrum of who we are, including the bits we find uncomfortable or shameful. This integration is vital for breaking free from those rigid, repetitive ways of being.
And I read somewhere that mourning is a big part of this. Letting go.
Yes, mourning is essential. allowing ourselves to grieve.
Grieve what, though?
Grieving the loss of illusions. Grieving the unmet expectations, maybe the childhood you wished you'd had, the parent you needed but didn't get. Grieving the life you might have envisioned that didn't unfold because of these patterns.
Acknowledging the pain of the past, the losses.
Yes, and allowing ourselves to truly feel that loss, that sadness. It sounds counterproductive, maybe, but it's necessary. Mourning allows us to loosen the grip the past has on our present. By acknowledging the disappointments, the unfulfilled longings, we create space.
Space for what?
Space for new possibilities. Space for a different kind of future to emerge. One not so heavily dictated by those old patterns.
It sounds like a lifelong journey, really. Not something you just fix and you're done.
I believe that's very true. The journey of self-discovery, of understanding our inner world, is ongoing. There will likely always be aspects of our unconscious that remain somewhat mysterious, beyond our full grasp.
So it's less about reaching some final destination of perfect self-knowledge.
Yes, much less about that, and more about embracing the continuous unfolding, the process itself, approaching ourselves, our patterns, our inner world, with ongoing curiosity and, importantly, self-compassion.
That makes sense. It takes the pressure off needing to have it all figured out right now.
Exactly. It's an exploration full of unexpected discoveries and shifts in perspective. There's always more to learn about the intricate workings of our own minds and hearts. The key is the willingness to keep looking, keep exploring, keep feeling.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe the thing for you, the listener, to reflect on is that hallway metaphor again, that dimly lit hallway inside. Which of those familiar doors feels like it's, well, pulling you in the most insistently right now?
A powerful question.
What unseen forces, what defenses or resistances might be keeping that pattern in place? What stories are you telling yourself about it? And perhaps most importantly, what stories might you be ready or almost ready to start rewriting?
And considering those other doors, perhaps the ones you haven't dared to peek behind yet, what unexplored rooms might exist in your unconscious hallway that hold the potential for a truly different, maybe more fulfilling future?
Lots to think about. It's about carrying these questions with you, isn't it, on that ongoing journey?